Alright, welcome everyone back to another stream. Today is day 8 of becoming a full stack developer in 8 months. 8 months, day 8, day going to be good. So, what we're tackling is array methods, hence the description. Oops, what the hell are array methods? Right, so let me show you where we're at. Yesterday I couldn't really focus and concentrate, so I didn't make much progress off stream, which means you'll see more of my learning today. But I went through the array methods guide, which was quite long. There you go. And now we have a couple of videos to watch, and then we'll do these exercises from their repository. First I wanted to watch through this video, so I'll put it on full screen and we'll watch it together.
In the previous lesson, we looked at the very basics of arrays. We talked about how to create them, add
Let me bump it up a little bit so you can hear it better.
items to them, and remove items from them. In this lesson, we are going to continue looking at the basics, and we will look at the two most common loops, the for loop and the while loop. And what I want to do is create a shopping list. As you can see over on the right-hand side of the screen, there is already...
Meet Kiana, Shiori, and Karthik, just a few merchants from around the globe who have switched to...
Well, after we call splice, we can write out our numbers array to the console, and then finally we will be back to our original version where we have 4 elements, 1, 2, 4, and 8. Well, in the next lesson we will take a look at some of the basic loops so that we can iterate and process arrays. In the previous lesson we looked at the very basics of arrays. We talked about how to create them, add items to them, and remove items from them. In this lesson, we are going to continue looking at the basics, and we will look at the two most common loops, the for loop and the while loop.
Okay.
And what I want to do is create a shopping list. As you can see over on the right-hand side of the screen, there is already some text for a shopping list, and if we look at this HTML, we have a UL element that has an ID of list. And basically, I want to take the items inside of the array that we are going to create, and I want to create LI elements. So let's say that we want to make breakfast. So we need to get some milk, we need some butter and some bread and some eggs and all of that stuff. So the end result is going to be an unordered list that has LI elements for, of course, the things that we need to buy. But of course, we're going to generate those using JavaScript. So let's start by creating this list array. We want some milk. We also need some eggs. Let's get some butter for the bread that we are going to make for toast. And then, of course, we need some bacon. And for each one of these strings, we want to create an LI element so that we can display that in our list. And we do that by using a loop. Now, this is one of the reasons why we have arrays. It is a collection of things that we can work with very easily. We can process them using the same code, and that's what a loop does. It executes the same code for every item inside of an array.
You can
and
also use mod for that.
The most common loop is the for loop, which has 4 parts to it. The first is the initialization. The second is the condition. The third is the increment, and then the fourth is the code that's actually going to execute. So the initialization is typically used for initializing a counter variable, something that we can use to keep track of the index of the item that we are currently working with. So let's do that. We'll create a variable called index, and we want to start the loop at the very beginning of our array. So index is going to be 0. Now, if you're looking at other people's code, they might use the variable name of I. That's very common. I use II, because if I need to search for my counter variable, well, there's not many words that have 2 consecutive I's. The same can't be said for just I, because, well, list has an I, milk has an I, and there's a lot of of i's that you find in your code. So I use II, but let's use index because that is exactly what we are going to be doing. We're going to keep track of the index. Now, the second part, this condition, this determines if the loop executes or if it exits. So if it's true, the loop executes. Never use true here.
No.
But if it's false, then of course
Never is
exit.
true.
So we want to execute our loop for every element within our list array. So that means index needs to start at 0 for milk. We need to change index to 1 so that we can work with eggs. Then index needs to be 2 to work with butter, and so on and so forth. But we only want to work with the amount of items inside of this list. So one thing we could do is say that as long as index is less than 5, because we have 5 elements, and remember that since we start the index at 0, by the time we get to bacon, that is index 4. So if we get to index 5, then we want to exit the loop. However, we don't want to hard code our limit here, because if we ever decide to add some sausage, because, well, if you're going to have bacon, you might as well have sausage, well, then we also have to come to the loop, and we have to change our limit here. So instead, what we can do is use the length property on our array. That's going to return the length, which is, as it happens, the limit of our array. And anytime we add a new element to the array, well, let's get some juice, then that length is going to change. And then finally, the increment. We want to increment our index every time the loop executes. That's how we know if our index is less than the length of our array. All right, so we simply want to generate some HTML. So let's do this. Let's create a variable called HTML. We'll start it off as an empty string, and then what we will do is get our unordered list elements. I believe the ID was simply list, and we will set the inner HTML equal to that HTML. So that inside of the for loop, all we need to do is just add a new li element to our HTML string. And since we have just simple strings, we can say list and then use index notation to get the item at that given index.
All right.
And there we go. So
Let's
if we
proceed
save this,
forward.
let's go to the browser and refresh. There we
we go.
have our list of things. Perfect.
Okay.
But most of the time, we aren't working with simple values. We are working with more complex values like objects. So I'm going to paste in some objects. These objects have 3 properties. The first is the text. That's what we want to display in the browser. The second is the cost, because it would be nice to actually show the cost of the item so that if we have a budget, then we can at least say, oh, okay, this list is going to be, roughly $30-something. And then later we will talk about this need property. Let's ignore that for now. So let's go to our HTML. Let's add a span element to this H2 so that we can output the cost here. And let's just give this an idea of cost. So that's going to work fine. Let's go ahead and set up that so that we output that value. And we will put a $sign before it. Let's have a running total. We will just call it total. Why not? And so let's create that total variable. We will initialize it as 0. And so now if we refresh the browser, we should see 0. But notice now that we see object. Well, that makes perfect sense because we are no longer working with just simple strings. We now have objects. So whenever we want to output the text, we have to use the text property. So let's refresh, and there we go. So we can make our lives a little bit easier inside of the loop. With just simple strings, we now have objects.
He's accessing the text.
So let's refresh.
Inside of the object.
And there we go. So we can make our lives a little bit easier inside of the loop by creating a variable. We'll just call it item, and we will get the element at the given index. And then we can just use this item variable to reference the object that we are currently working with. So this makes it a little bit easier to process all of this information. So now we want to process the cost, and we will simply take each item's cost and add that to our running total, which that variable name is called total. So with that in place, we can refresh and voila, we have our shopping list. We expect it to be $34, but well, money's tight right now, so let's say that we have a budget of $30. Well, okay. And that's where this need property can come into play. Yes, it would be nice to have milk, but we don't really need that for our breakfast. So we need to include that as we are processing the array inside of the for loop. So let's just add an if statement. If we need that item, then we will output that item to our list and we will calculate the total there. Otherwise, we just ignore that. And whenever we run this in the browser, we are going to see our total changes. We are now...
You can basically do this with filter. You can do it with map probably, and you can do the the total with reduce.
Under budget, we're at $25, which that's good. Saving money is always great. And we have our eggs, bread.
Is he going to use that?
So there we go. That's the for loop. Now another common loop is the while loop. So let's take a
I'm
look
not sure
at
if
that.
he's going to
We will
use
essentially
those.
do the same thing, such as outputting information. We will also take
Anyways.
into account all of the other information about our shopping list, but we will use the while loop. Now, the while loop has just two parts to it. It has the condition, which, once again, it will determine whether or not the loop is going to execute. And then the second part is the code that will execute. So this particular loop is very easy to get into an infinite loop. If you have a condition that is always true, you are going to have a rough time. But let's essentially do the same thing that we did for the for loop, but we will use the while loop. So that as long as we have an item to work with, then we can work with that item inside of our loop. So let's copy and paste our code, at least for checking if we need that item and then processing that item. But that in and of itself isn't going to work because as it is right now, we haven't done anything with this item variable. It doesn't even exist. So let's start by creating that item variable, and we will initialize that as the first item within our list. But be very, very, very careful here, because as it is right now, our code doesn't change one bit. And actually this code won't work because we don't have that index variable, but that's easy enough to do. So we initialize index as 0. We get the first item in the list. We use that as the condition for the while loop. But since we never change the value of item, we are in an infinite loop. We could go over to the browser and refresh this, but no, I'm not going to, because we wouldn't really see anything because the loop would never exit and we would never execute this code here. So instead, what we can do inside of this while loop is set a new value for item, to where we will once again use index notation, but we will increment index here. So the concept is very similar to what we did in the for loop. It's just organized in a slightly different way. All of our initialization stuff is done outside of the loop. We rely upon the condition to determine whether or not the loop will execute. We do the loop, but then we need to change whatever values we've used inside of the condition. Otherwise, we would end up with an infinite loop. But if we save this, we go to the browser and refresh, we can see that we have the same exact result. And if we decide that, hey, money's great, we don't need to worry about our budget, we can comment out the code for determining if we need that item. And if we refresh, we have a bug because we initialized the item as the first element in the array. Now, what we could do is organize this a little bit differently, so that instead of just using item for our condition, we could use the assignment of item. And then whenever we create the item variable, we just won't initialize it. That gives us a little bit cleaner code. And so now, if we take a look at them,
I didn't quite get that.
instead of just using item for our condition,
Right.
we could use the assignment of item. And then whenever we create the item variable, we just won't initialize it. That gives us a little bit cleaner code. Is as the fresh, we have a bug. Because we initialized the item as the first element in the array. Now, what we could do is
Why is it
organize
the
this a little
first
bit differently.
element? Index is 0, so item at list index 0 is milk, right? Wow, item. And it's referring to the milk. So it will do whatever and then it will bump up the index. So why are we seeing milk 2 times? I'm not sure still.
Money's great. We don't need to worry about our budget. We can comment out the code for determining if we need that item. And if we refresh, we have a bug. Because we initialized the item as the first element in the array. Now, what we could do is organize this a little bit differently, so that instead of just using item for our condition, we could use the assignment of item. And then whenever we create the item variable, we just won't initialize it. That gives us a little bit cleaner code. And so now, if we take a look at the browser,
I'm not sure why that
we
works.
get the correct results. And once again,
If anyone
we
knows,
need
write
to
it in the comments,
factor
please.
in our budget. We can just uncomment that code, refresh, and we have our condensed shopping list.
Когато правителството казва, че инфлацията е само хикс,
I probably have to change my account to the premium one.
Let's continue this discussion on iterating arrays, because while the for and while loops are useful, a lot of times we just want to iterate the array so that we can work with the individual elements. We don't necessarily care about the index or anything like that, and we certainly don't want to go through the rigmarole of setting up a traditional for loop or priming up a while loop. So there are essentially 2 different ways of just iterating over an array. The first uses the for each method. This takes a functional approach because you pass a callback function to the for each method, and this callback will execute for every element in the array. So this callback function has 3 parameters. The first is the most important. It's the item or the element that you want to work with inside of the array. The second parameter is the index. So if you need the index, then that is a perfect way of getting that. And then finally, the third is the array itself that you are working with. Now, of course, you can use all of those that you want, but typically you just want the item. So I'm going to make this a little more concise so that it's a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to use an arrow function. And so just this alone, we now have access to the item that we want to work with. We don't have to create that variable or anything like that. Don't have to prime anything. It's just given to us by default. So we can take the code from our while loop and we can just paste that inside of the callback function for our for each. And whenever we run this in the browser, we are going to see the same exact results. Perfect. That's what we want. Most of the time, this is what we want to do. Just iterate over the array. However, once again, if you need access to the index, just get the index as the second parameter for your callback function. Now we can make this a little easier to read by destructuring this item parameter. We need the text property, the cost, and the need property. And then inside of our callback function, we can just refer to those individual values. We don't have to have item dot in front of them, and everything is going to work just as it did before. So great, perfect, awesome. However, if you don't want to use the for each method, because it does require a little bit of different thinking because it is functional programming, we do have another version of the for loop. It's called the for of loop, and it looks like this. We start with for. But instead of having an initialization, a condition, and
So for item of array,
we create the variable that we want to work with, the individual item here, of, and then the name of our array list. So for each item of our list, we want to essentially do the same thing that we did with the for each loop. But, we can destructure this as well. So If we just need the text and the cost, that's great. We can do that.
I didn't know you can
Need.
put them in
And
curly
then this gives
brackets.
us a quick and easy way.
This
to
is very
iterate
useful.
Over that array as well. So let's comment out our for each and let's refresh and we get the same exact result. Now, if for some reason we are using the for of loop and we need to access the index, we have to do a little bit more work because it's not going to give us the index by default. So instead what we can do is call the entries method on the list. Now this is going to return an iterator. An iterator is a special kind of object that produces a sequence of values. In this particular case, the sequence of values is a set of key value pairs. The keys in this particular case are the indexes, and then the values are the individual items or the individual elements that we want to work with. And these key value pairs are actually inside of another array. The first element in this key value pair array is the index. The second is the value. So it's a little more confusing, and really if you need access to the index, I recommend using something other than the for of loop, because the for each loop is perfect for that. It gives it to you out of the box by passing it as an argument for your callback function, or use the traditional for loop. But still, we've started down this path. Let's finish it. So we could do this. We can destructure this so that we have the index and then we have the item. But also we want to destructure the item, so we will do that as well. So now we have access to the index if we need that. So let's output the index of each one of these items whenever we output the text, so that in the browser we can refresh the page, we can see the indexes for those items in the list. Again, while this works, if you need the index, use something other than a for of, just because it takes everyone's brains a little bit longer to decipher this code to understand what's going on, and you are typing a lot more than you would need for the for each method. So keep it simple with the for of. In fact, I'm going to back out those changes so that we don't have to see them. In the next lesson, we will talk about sorting arrays. Sometimes you just want to sort an array, especially if you plan on displaying the contents of that
Yesterday I
array to the
understood
user,
that the sort
we
method
humans are
is
very
strange.
simple. We like things in order.
That's what
So
I
JavaScript
understood
makes it
about
very
it.
easy to sort in ascending order. All we need to do is call the sort method, and that's it. Now this is a destructive method. This changes the array. So this doesn't create a copy that is sorted. This actually changes the order of the elements. So as I've defined this list array in eggs, butter, milk, bread, and bacon, whenever we call the sort method, we are going to see that it is
will
sorted
rearrange
in
them.
ascending order. Bacon, bread, butter, eggs, and milk. Now,
But it doesn't
JavaScript does
work
not
exactly
have
the same
a method
for numbers.
sorting in descending order. However, we can get a descending ordered array by calling sort and then simply reversing it. And in the browser, we can see that it is indeed in descending order. Now, the only reason why this works is because the reverse method, it doesn't do any sorting. It just simply reverses the array. So what is the first element becomes the last element. What was the last element becomes the first element. So if we take a look at this in the browser, we can see that the original order is eggs, butter, milk, bread, bacon. In the reversed order, it is bacon, bread, milk, butter, and eggs. So, of course, if you want descending order, then just sort it and then reverse it. But that is a little inefficient from an execution standpoint. It would be better to just sort it in descending order. And we can do that because we can pass a callback function to the sort method. Now, this callback function is a comparison function. It is going to accept two elements from the array, and we are supposed to compare them. We need to return one of three values. We need to return 0, which typically means that A is equal to B, which also means that there is no change, because if A and B are equal, then there's no reason to change their order. They're equal. So there's no change if you return 0. Now you can return a negative value, but we typically just return -1. This typically means that A should be sorted before B. And then the only other value is a positive value, which once again is just usually 1. And that means that B is sorted before A. So those are the values that we need to return. So if we want to sort our array in descending order, it would look something like this. We will start off with our easiest comparison, because if it's equal, then we just return 0. But if A is greater than B, well, that means that we want A to come before B because we are sorting in descending order, which means that we need to return 1 there. Otherwise, we just return -1 because that's the only other thing that we can return. So with this in place, we should be able to refresh in the browser, and no, that is sorted wrong. Oh, because my logic is wrong. If A is greater than B, then we want A to
This something.
before B,
This is like a
because we
mistake I would do. That's why I'm not trying to memorize. Like I'll just try it out when it comes time to do this.
return -1.
As you can see, he's making the tutorial and he still messed it up. So
My fault. So there we go. Now, whenever we refresh, we see that it is in descending order. So perfect. Of course, if we wanted it in ascending order, well, there would be no reason to pass a callback function unless if you were working with something like an array of objects. So let's take a look at that, because in most cases we're working with objects as opposed to just simple values. So we have a second list. I'm going to just call it list 2. This is our breakfast stuff. And let's say that we want to, first of all, sort by the text property. Okay, we can do that very easily by just using the text property inside of our comparison. So we're going to compare A text to B.
instead of doing that, if you want to sort it on the text, can't you just do a.text and b.text in the brackets?
Text. And of course we need to change which array that we use here. But other than that, that should work. Although whenever we call for each, let's do this. Let's extract out the text so that we can see that within the browser. So once again, we see our sorted array in descending order, but let's say this. Let's sort our items by cost so that instead of text, we do so by cost. So that should be easy enough to do, but let's make this in ascending order. So this means that if A is greater than B, then we need to return 1, otherwise we return -1. But we also need to display the cost so that we can easily see if it is correct or not. So let's add cost to our output. And we should
Why is he using
our array.
2 times $? I don't get that. Of course, to add the symbol itself.
Sorted in ascending
Right.
order based upon cost, and we do. And of course, if we wanted this in descending order, we could just flip this comparison, and that will change the sort order to be in descending order based on the cost. So if your array is simple values, then using the sort method can be very simple. But of course, the more complex the data is, the more complex your sort callback function is going to be. But of course, the fact that you can provide a callback function means that you can sort your data however you need. Over the next couple of lessons, we will talk about searching arrays, because, remember,
Finding
an array is
elements
just a collection
index.
of things,
So
and
index
sometimes
of-
we want to search an array for an index of an item, or we need to find an item based upon a certain criteria, or sometimes we just need to know if an item exists within an array. So in this lesson, we will talk about finding the index of an item within the array. And there's really 3 methods that we can use to do that. The first is called index of, and as its name implies, it is going to return the index of an item that you provide. And for example, we have a list of just simple values, and let's say that we want to get the index of the item that is butter. So let's write this out to the console. We will pass butter to the index of method, and it will return, let's see, that
2.
is index 2. So over in the console, we should see the value of 2, and we do. If we change it to bread, then we should have the index of 4, because bread is at the index of 4. So it's a very easy and straightforward method. But what happens if you try to
Cool.
find an item that does not exist within the array, like sausage?
In the
Well,
front.
that returns -1, which
Negative
makes
1.
perfect sense, really,
I
because
messed it up.
an index can be 0 or a positive integer. So really, the only thing that can denote an invalid item, or at least an item that
I wonder if you try to return an item for the list and you do list.index of sausage, for example, and it's -1, if it will go from the end of the array and return bacon.
that does not exist within the array would have to be a negative value.
Not sure.
So -1 is what index of will return. But let's look at this. Notice that we have bacon twice inside of this array. We
It
have
will
it at
return the
index of
first
0
instance.
and then index of, what is that, 5? Yes, I believe 5. So let's see what happens if we find the index of bacon. Well, in the console, we see the value of 0, which also makes perfect sense, because the index of method is going to search an array starting at index 0, and it's going to search the array until it finds a match or until it gets to the end of the array. So in our particular case, we want to find the index of bacon. Well, it found bacon on the very first element, so it stopped searching because it found a match. So we get the value of 0. But what if we want to find this second occurrence of bacon? Well, we can pass in a second argument to the index of method, which is the starting index of where we want to start searching. So if we start searching at index 1, well, then the value that index of returns is going to change, because it's going to start searching at eggs, and then it's going to search through to the end of the array. So we
Alright,
get
so you
the
can
value
set
of
it
5. Now, an alternative solution
to where you
would
want
be
to search.
use the last
From where you want to
index
search.
of method, which almost works exactly the same, except that it starts searching at the end of the array and it searches towards the beginning. So
Okay.
if we use last index of and pass in bacon, since it starts searching at the end, we are going to see the same value, 5, because that's where it started searching. So index of and last index of are very, very easy methods. It will return -1 if it cannot find
One
the
just
item that
starts
you're
from the
searching
back.
for. Otherwise,
Okay.
it returns the index of that item. Now, one thing of note is that index of and last index of work best with very simple values. So for example, we have strings. If you have an array of numbers, index of and last index of is going to work very well. But what if you have a more complex value like an object? So I'm going to paste in an object. We don't necessarily need the need property, so let's get rid of that. And let's say that we want to find the index of this particular object that has a text of bread and a cost of 3. Well, we can try to use the index of method. However, here's the thing. An object is a reference value. It is a reference in memory. So if we take this object and we pass that same object, well, it's not really the same object, it looks like the same object, we are going to see -1 in the console. And the reason is because that according to JavaScript, these are two completely separate objects. What we
Right.
have inside of the list array and what we pass to the index of method looks exactly the same, but they are two different references of memory. So instead, what we can use is a method called find.
I remember this back from when I was learning Java, so it's not that confusing this time.
Index, which gives us the ability to pass in a callback function, and it is going to use that function to try to find whatever it is we specify. So we want to find the object that has the text of bread. So that could look like this. We would have a callback function to where we work with the individual item, and we simply want to find the item that has bread for its text. The return value of this callback function needs to be a Boolean value. If it returns true, then the find index method has found the item that we are searching for. If it's false, then it's not. It's going to continue searching through the array. So if we take a look at this in the browser, it changes. Now we can see that our object that has the text of bread is at index 6. And of course, we could simplify this using an arrow function. So let's do that. So when it comes to finding the index, we essentially have 3 different methods that we can use. The index of and last index of methods are useful for simple values. The find index method is useful for objects or reference value. In the next lesson, we are going to talk about the find method, which is somewhat similar to the find index method, except that it allows us to search an array for an actual item so that we can retrieve that item.
Okay.
Sometimes we just need to find an element in the array. We don't need the index or anything like that. We just need to find an element so that we can work with that element. And the array's find method does just that. Now, this is a lot like the find index method that we looked at in the previous lesson, in that we provide a callback function that is going to test each element in the array. And this function needs to return a Boolean value. If it's true, then, well, we found that item, and so the find method is going to return that item to us. If not, then it's going to keep testing all of the elements until it reaches the end, at which point we don't find anything. So here we have our list of things. These are more complex objects, which the find method is perfect for because our little testing function gives us the ability to test whatever we need to test. So let's say that we want to find the item that has the text of eggs. Well, we can do that. Our testing function is very simple in that case because all we need to do is check the text property. If it's eggs, then great. We then have that item that we can work with so that in the console we will see that object. We successfully retrieved that object. We can see the cost if we need it, and of course the text. What happens though if we don't find a match? Like for example, if we try to find an element that has a text of sausage, well, that object of course does not exist. So undefined is returned to our variable, which makes sense because we aren't dealing with indexes or anything like that. So getting a value of -1, like we did in the previous lesson, doesn't make much sense. We didn't find anything. We don't have a value to work with, so therefore it is undefined. But let's say that we need something a little more open-ended. We don't necessarily want to look for an item that has an exact text. Let's just say that we want the first item that has a cost less than 5. Well, our function would look something like this, to where the cost would be less than 5. And once again, it's going to search the array starting at the beginning, and it's going to test each one of those elements until it finds a match, at which point it's going to return that. So according to our costs, that should be the item of milk. So let's run this in the browser, and sure enough, that's what we get. That is the first object that had a cost less than 5. Now, one of the great things about the find method is that while it seems very suited just for objects, that's not necessarily the case. We can use it for any kind of value.
Okay.
So for example, I'm going to paste in an array of numbers, 5, 9, 23. If you notice, pretty much all of them are odd numbers, except for one, 54. So let's say that we want to find
So you do find the numbers that divided by 2 doesn't leave a remainder.
Number in our numbers array
Remainder.
that is even.
Not
Well,
reminder.
we can do that very easily by using the mod operator. So if the value mod 2 is equal to 0, then we have an even number. So if we output this variable to the console, we should see the value of 54 because that is the first, and really it's the only value inside of our numbers array that is even. So it doesn't matter what type of data that you're working with. The find method is very useful if you need to find an element based upon certain criteria. We've talked about finding an index of an element. We've also talked about finding elements themselves, but sometimes you just need to know if an element exists inside of an array. And JavaScript gives us several methods that we can use to do just that. all of these methods return a Boolean value, true if the item exists, false if it doesn't. And we will begin with the most simple method. It's called includes. And I say that it is the most simple because you would typically use this with the most simple kinds of values, strings or numeric values. So in that sense, it's a lot like the index of and last index of methods. However, there are some times when you would want to use it with a reference value, but those particular times are really up to you if it fits your use case. So here I am calling includes on our numbers array. We're going to see if the value of 23 can be found, and of course it is because it's defined as the value at index 2. But let's see if the value of 24 is there. And of course that is not, so it returns false. So it's a pretty simple method. Now if you need a little more flexibility, then we can use a method called sum. The idea being that we are going to check if at least some of the elements in the array meet a certain criteria. So here we're going to use our list of objects, and we're going to call sum. And let's say that we want to see if there are some items within this list that are needed. So we have that need property. So we would pass in a callback function that would test each element in the array. Well, actually, it doesn't test each element. If it finds an element that passes our test, then it is going to just automatically return true, because in that particular case, some of the elements do meet that criteria.
Alright, but if you don't test every single element, how do you know which element passes the test?
So here we will check if an item is needed. And of course we are going to see the value of true because we do have some items that are needed. But let's do this. Let's set all of the items as false, just so that we can see that whenever we refresh the page, we can see that the returned value of the sum
You get
method
false.
is false. But even if just one is true, then the return value is going to be true. So we can provide a callback function that will test to see if an item matches that criteria. And then the third method is somewhat similar, except that it will return true or false based upon if every element in the array meets a certain criteria. So let's go back to our numbers. And let's say that we want to see if every number in this array is an odd number. To do that, we simply call the every method. Once again, we pass in a callback function that will test the elements in this array, and we can determine if a number is odd using the mod operator. If it is not 0, I guess that's what we ought to check for, then that would mean that the number is odd. So let's refresh the page. We're going to see that it is false because we do have one even item. But let's change that to an odd numeric value. Let's refresh the page, and we see that it flips to true because every value inside of the numbers array is odd. And so by using the includes, sum, and every methods, you can determine if an element exists in an array. Eventually, you will want to merge multiple arrays into a single array. And JavaScript gives us the tools that we need to concatenate or merge multiple arrays. Now, I use that term concatenate specifically because we have a method simply called concat, short for concatenation, and it does what you would think it does. It concatenates multiple arrays into a single array. Now, this does not modify any existing array. This creates a brand new array that contains the original array that we start with. In this case, I have two arrays, one called odd, one called even. So I'm going to start with the odd array, and we are going to concatenate the even array with odd. This will give us a new array, which I'm storing in the numbers variable, and we can write that out to the console. In fact, let's do this. Let's write out the odd, even, and the numbers array, just so that we can see that the original arrays are still intact without any modification, and of course our new array contains all of those values. So the first two arrays are of course the odd and even. Everything everything is the same there. But let's take a look
This
at
one's
our
pretty
new
easy.
array, the numbers array. We have all of those values, but also notice that they are in the same exact order that they appeared in their original arrays. So we started with the odd array. So the first few values are from the odd array. We concatenate the even array, and those appear afterwards, and they are in the same order. But let's say that we have a third array that we want to concatenate with those. And let's just call this letters. So we will have a few string values to represent individual letters, and then we will pass letters as a second argument to the concat method. And that's all that we need to do. It is going to concatenate all of those arrays into a single array. And just like before, all of the values are going to be in the order that they appeared in their original arrays. So once again, we have the odd, we have the even, and now we have the letters array. But now we can take a look at, well, it's no longer numbers, is it? But we can see that, once again, we have the values from the odd array. We then have the values from the even array, and then we have the values from the letters array. So it's a pretty simple thing to do, just to call the concat method. Now, we can also merge multiple arrays by using the spread operator. So let's do the same thing, except let's call this alphanumeric, because that is exactly what it is. And all we have to do is just create a new array, and we will spread out the odd, the even, and the letters array. So we essentially end up with the same exact type of
Thank you so much, Xander. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, my guy.
array. But now it's
I didn't know you could do that with the triple dots.
a bit more declarative than using the concat method. And if we take a look at the output, of course, the first three arrays are the same. We haven't changed those, but our alphanumeric array.
This is so much easier. How could how could I never knew about this?
Same values in the same order that the concat method gave us. So when you need to merge multiple arrays, you have two options. You can call the concat method, or you can use the spread operator.
The spread operator, cool. I need to remember that.
In a world of digitalization, an ancient...
Of course, there will come a time when you want to copy an array, and JavaScript
Sorry
gives
for the
us
ads.
the slice method to do just that. We simply call the slice method on whatever array that we want to copy, and that is going to create a copy. Now, the name slice is a misnomer to me because it makes me think that I'm slicing out things into another array, and that's not the case. It doesn't modify the existing array at all. It just copies it. So we're going to start by this. We're going to copy the entire
This will
array.
copy the full
And
array.
let's first of all write out the copied array to the console. We are going to see we have those 5 items. But let's do this now. Let's see if the copy array is the same array object as
I think
list.
so.
You know, kind of like we
But
would
he
have
said
2
objects or something
variables
to
that
be the same
reference
one.
the same thing. Well, I can go ahead and tell you that that is not the case, because whenever you call the slice method, it is going to create a brand new array.
Because arrays
It's
are
just going to
objects.
contain the same things. And that there is key, because since we are dealing with objects, these are reference values. The slice method doesn't create a copy of these objects. Since these are references, the references are copied to the new array. So what we end up with are 2 arrays that contain
Alright, and if it was basic integers, would there be true then? If it didn't contain objects but just integers, for example.
the same references. So you can get yourself into trouble if you copy an array and you think that you are working with different objects. Now, values, on the other hand, simple values like strings, numbers, Boolean, you don't have to worry about that because those are values.
Alright, so
They aren't references.
Yeah,
If
basically
you're
answers
dealing
my
with
question.
objects, then you have to worry about it. Now, let's say that we want a shorter copy. We don't want to copy the entire list array. So that's where the argument
So he'll put from what index to what index he wants a copy, and
that we pass to this
In the copy it will be just from those two indexes.
Slice method come into play. The first argument is the index of where we want to start the copy. So let's say that we want to copy bacon, eggs, and butter. So our copy will begin at bacon, and we want to copy the next 3 items. So we pass in the number of items that we want to copy, not the ending index of what we want to copy to. This
So
is
not the index,
number
but the number
elements
of...
that we want to copy.
Right.
So in this
I
particular
messed that
case,
up.
this is going to give us a new array that contains just bacon, eggs, and butter. So let's refresh. We see we have that new array with those 3 items. And that's it. The slice method is very straightforward. The key thing to remember is that it doesn't change the existing array. But if you do copy an array of objects, just know that the objects are shared between the 2 arrays. JavaScript has the ability to transform an array into a string. And I use that term transform very loosely because the methods that we talk about typically don't change the array itself. It leaves the array alone. Instead, it simply returns a new value. So, like the slice method that we talked about in the previous lesson, it did not change the existing array, it just created a new array. Well, the method that we will talk about in this lesson is called join, and it will join the individual elements of an array into a single string.
Yeah.
So if we don't pass anything to the join method, it is going to separate each one of the elements with a comma. So let's see what this looks like. We will retrieve the elements with the ID of list, and then let's set the inner HTML to our new HTML. So this HTML variable is going to contain the text of bacon, eggs, butter, milk, and bread. And of course, everything is separated with a comma. But we can change that by passing anything to the join method. I say anything. Whatever we pass to the join method is what is going to separate the individual elements. So if we pass in an empty string, well, then we're going to get a string of all of those words just combined together. That's not very useful. At least in our case, I could see where that would be useful in other cases. But that's not very readable to the user. Now, of course, a comma-separated list is somewhat readable. But let's do this. Let's separate each element with a breaking line.
Since you use an HTML,
every element is on
since
its
you use
own line.
inner HTML, you can use the break line. That's cool. If you're not using inner HTML but rather text content, let's say, you will not be able to use the break line. It will just show the break line instead of actually making a new line. But because you're using inner HTML, you can do that. That's pretty cool.
That's much easier to read. And that is essentially it. Transforming an array into a string is as easy as calling the join method. All you have to do is specify whatever you want to separate the elements, and that's it. It really doesn't get any easier than that. Transforming an array into another array is a very, very common thing, especially if you start using some very popular UI frameworks like React. Now, I use that term transform, and that's really not the right term to use here, because it makes you think that we are changing or manipulating an existing array, and we aren't. We are creating a new array that contains transformed data. And we do this by using a method called map. So here's what we want to do. In the past, when we talked about the loops,
Alright, finally
such as
he's
the
using
for
map.
of loop, the while loop, for loop, and the for each method, we created li elements using our breakfast food information, and we displayed those li elements in the browser. We're going to do the same thing, but now we are going to use the map method, which is arguably the correct way of going about doing this.
Alright.
So we will call map, and we need to pass a callback function that is going to execute on each item within our list, and it is going to output the li element that contains all of the information that we need. So we need our function that will work with the individual item. And let's go ahead and destructure our item so that we have access to text, cost, and the need properties. And to start with, let's just return an li element that has the text, and we will go from there. So what the map method is going to do is execute this callback function on every element, and it's going to create a new array that will contain this transformed data. So let's just write this out to the console so that you can see what the end result is. So let's do that. Let's open up the console in the browser. Let's refresh. And here we have an array of 5 elements, but you can see that the text is here. These are li elements that contain bacon, eggs, butter, milk, and bread. So we now have a transformed array that has the data that we need to display within the browser. However, we need to convert this array of strings into a single string so that we can easily add that to our list within the browser. Well, we already know how to do that because in the previous lesson we talked about the join method. That's how we converted an array into a string. So we can take our list elements and we can join them together with an empty string, and we are going to end up with our list of things: bacon, eggs, milk, and bread. Perfect. So let's include the cost so that we can see that information. And whenever we view this in the browser, we see the cost as well. So now let's incorporate the need property. And let's say that if an item is needed, then we will simply return that li element. But if it's not, then we will return just an empty string. Because remember that we need to return a value here. This callback function is responsible for transforming each individual element into whatever it is that we want. So if the item is needed, we want the li element. If it's not needed, we don't need to display that in the list, so we will just have an empty string. Because ultimately it doesn't matter, because once we join the elements together and set the inner HTML, all of those empty spaces aren't going to be rendered within the browser. So let's refresh now, and we can see that we have bacon, eggs, and bread because those are the only items that we actually need. But we can do this a different way by using another method called filter, which we will look at in the next lesson. We used the map method to transform an array of objects into an array of strings that contains HTML. And if the item was needed, then of course we have the HTML to display that item in the browser. If it's not needed, we just have an empty string. And while this particular approach works, I don't like it. Because when it comes to the map method, I want to work with only the elements that I need.
So you have to filter the array before that.
So for example, the map method only needs to work with the elements
you filter on the need.
So that it would be great if we could just eliminate the use of that need property so that our method looks like this. And in fact, we could even break this down even further by using the arrow function syntax. Because I like nice, neat, concise.
Yes, me too.
And thankfully, we have the ability to filter an array. The method is called filter. Now, once again, I feel like I need to stress this, that the methods that we are talking about do not change our existing array. It simply creates a new array that contains whatever it is that we are doing. So like the map method created a new array with our HTML elements. Well, we have a method called filter, which will filter an array, but again, it doesn't change our existing array. It creates a new array that contains the filtered elements. And this accepts a callback function that will test each element in the array. And if the test is true, that element will be in the new filtered array. If it's false, then it will be left out. So we want only the items that are needed.
So in brackets item and return need.
Because this is going to be very simple. If the item is needed, well then we want to display that. So right here we have filtered our array of objects into another array
Can't
that
you
contains
just do
only the items
need
that are
without
needed,
item dot?
so that whenever we map them, we are working only with those three elements. So in the browser, whenever we refresh, we see the same exact results. That's great. Well, let's change this up a little bit. Let's say that we want the items that we need, and we want only the items that cost less than $12. So that's going to filter this down even more. So whenever we refresh this in the browser, we now see eggs and bread. And if we take a look at our data, yes, that is indeed the case. Our eggs are $10, our bread is $3. Everything else is either too expensive or it is not needed. So by combining the use of multiple methods together, we typically call this chaining methods, we can do some very powerful stuff. Thank you so much for watching this course. It is my
Was
hope
that
that by
it?
now you have a thorough understanding of how to iterate, sort,
Okay,
search,
yep.
copy, and manipulate arrays.
That was
They play a
helpful.
key part in data manipulation and processing. Not only can we iterate arrays to transform and aggregate data, but we can sort them in whatever order we need to display that data as we see fit. And because arrays are dynamic, we can easily add, remove, and modify elements, allowing for convenient manipulation and updating of data.
Cool, so this is done. Now we'll do the West Boss array cardio day 1 and day 2. He has some exercises here that we'll pause on and do them ourselves. We'll have to copy the repository, and after that we'll do these exercises from the origin project repository. Now, before I move on, I'll set up a quick timer. Let me set it up on my watch as well, so I know when to come back. Okay. I'm going off for 10 minutes so I can catch a quick break, and I'll be right back with you guys and we'll continue. Alright, going for a quick break and I'll be right back. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate you. Alright. Alright boys, I'm back. The Mesh, you're a fucking legend. Thank you so much, my guy. I don't know why my alerts are not working again. I really appreciate the sub that you left, brother. And the other guy who also left a sub. Yeah, I don't know why this is not working. It pisses me off. Not last stream, but the stream before that it was working perfectly fine. And now again. Let me just check it quickly. But thank you so much, the Mesh, you're a legend. Right. Session data. Yep. Alright, so hopefully it works now. I don't know, it's just very annoying. So anyways, what do we have to do now? Follow up by watching JavaScript array cardio practice day 1. By ways both to follow along fork and clone the JavaScript 30 repository. Array cardio day 1. Can I fork just this one? Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll create a new one. No description. Array cardio, create fork. Alright. Let's go in cd repos and clone it here. Rclone. Git clone. Git. Alright. It's quite a large repository. But cd into array cardio and cd into, what is it? 04. Right, I can minimize this, put this on the right, get this out of here, this as well, put it on the left. Now we have the index finished and the index start. We're not going to look at the finished. Let me toggle overdrop. View overdrop. Does he want me to write? Yeah, he wants me to write JavaScript in the HTML. Anyways. Let's just start his video and we'll see if we're going to watch it or we're just going to do the exercises.
You're fairly new to this stuff, then stick with me. So first thing we want to do is get people who were born in the 1500s. So I'm going to say const 15 equals, and we'll take the
Let me try to do this myself. So also const with the 15 like him equals, and we have to get the inventors array, inventors dot filter, and we're going to filter on each inventor. Is it inventor or inventor? Yeah, inventor. Do an arrow function and return. Wait, filter the list of inventor for those who were born in the 1500s. So if the year starts with 1-5, so inventor dot year is more than 15, and inventor dot past is less than 16. Alright, can we console log this just to see? I want to test one thing. So console dot log 15. Let me go live. We have to look at the console. No shit, Sherlock. I want to put this on the, yeah, right, like that. Okay, console, we get an array of 8. Can we make this larger for you guys? I was wondering if we could do this without the inventor. Doesn't seem like it. But we get an empty array. And why is that? Let's see what this guy did.
inventors, and we're going to filter over it. Now, the way that the filter works is you pass it a function, and that function is going to loop over every single item in our array. So Albert, Isaac, Galileo.
Okay.
And it's going to give us the inventor. It's, I don't know why I say all fancy. So what that does is we take the inventors, we loop over, and for each inventor, we can decide whether we want to keep it or not. So go here, we'll have an if statement, and we say if the inventor dot and the dot year, so that's when they were born. If the inventor dot year is greater or equal to 1500, and the inventor dot year is less than 1600, or we could do less or equal to 1599, whatever you prefer, whatever reads easier for you. then we are going to return true. And by returning true, that means we keep it. And then you don't have to, a lot of times I see else, people have an else here, and you return false. If you do not return anything other than true, or something that is truthy, it will just throw it in the garbage. So there's no need to return false here. You just return true if you want to keep it. So let's take a look at our variable here. We'll console.logit 15. We've got 2 people. This is a bit of a pain. So I'm going to show you a little tip. Console.table. Aha, very nice. So these.
Alright, let's do it with the table. Although nothing will be in the table. Yeah. What if we remove this? Inventory is not defined. Function. Nope.
These are the people that were born in the 1500s that we have here. Now, this can be greatly reduced. First of all, we can make this into an arrow function. So delete the word function.
Alright, where am I going wrong?
Parentheses around inventor if you prefer, and we'll make that an arrow.
You can delete the parentheses. Okay. Still nothing.
Function. Good, that still works. And then this right here, this just is either return true or.
I think I didn't put the curly brace, and that's why. Alright. No. Still not.
Return false. So what we can actually do is do it all in line, where we will just return these 2 things. So it's
alright. So what exactly am I doing wrong? He didn't even put the curly brackets, so I don't need this. And inventors const 15 inventors dot filter inventor dot year is more or equal than 1500s, and inventor dot because I used the dot past, so I actually did everything correct, but I used past instead of year, and then I'm trying to look for people that were born after the 1500 and died before 1600, but it seems like the only people we have that are born in the 1500s died in the 1600s, so that's why my array was empty. But everything else I've written it correctly, so now if we save it, we get a table with 2 guys. And that's cool. Alright.
It's going to give us the inventor, and we're going to return the result of these 2 things, which if both of them are true, it's going to return a boolean of true. And if that makes you a little bit uncomfortable reading that, you can throw an extra set of parentheses around it. You can delete this. We've done it all in one line. Still works just as we planned. Good. Next one. Give us an array of the inventor's first and last names. What does map do? Map.
They're telling you what you need to use. Alright. So give us an array of the inventor's first and last names. So we can have a constant give us an array of the inventor's first and last names, but I don't know if it should be an array of objects just like that, and just return those 2 for each one without the year and then everything else. So let's do const names equals inventors dot map, and what map does it goes through each one and executes the function. So what we want that function to do is basically catch the first name, put it into names, and the last name as well. But in order for us to do that, probably we have to right, I'm not sure how to make names as an array of objects, so I'm just going
Takes
to
in an array,
see how he did
does
it.
something with that array, and then returns a new array, but of the same length. I like to think of map as sort of like a factory machine where it takes in a raw material and will stamp it somehow and then kick out that item on the other end. Whereas filter, you can bring in 10 things and return 2. Map will always return the same amount of items as you give it. So here's what we're going to do is we'll say const full names equals inventors dot map. We
Alright.
have our inventor, and from that we are going to return the inventor dot first, because that's the first name, and we can return inventor dot last, console log the full names. Kind of works, but we still have a problem with the space here. So you could either concatenate in a space, which will work, or you can return backticks and use template strings.
Yes, template strings would be better.
Working great for us. Passed. Good.
Alright, I overthink that. I was overthinking. So you can get the inventor dot first and then inventor dot last. Now if you console log it, inventor is not defined, of course, because it has to be like that. Inventors dot map. I misspelled it. Inventor. Alright. And here it has to be dot first, not comma first. Alright, can we get it in a table? Yep, Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, so on and so forth. Alright, I want to comment these out. Sort the inventors by birth date, oldest to youngest. Alright, this is a perfect opportunity to use the sort, which we can just const sorted equals inventors dot sort, and then we have to pass in the callback function to tell it how to sort on years. So it's A and B. Let me console log it as well. Console log sorted, or we can use console.table, and probably this has to be in brackets, and then pass in a function that will if a equals b, return 0. Okay, if a is less than b, return 1. And return -1. Alright. And we actually have to sort it on the years, so a dot year so this is the other way around. It has to be, they have to be sorted oldest to no, oldest to youngest. Yeah, it's the other way around, so I'll just do that. So oldest to youngest, let me just double check it. Yeah, that seems like it's the case. Perfect. Let's see how he's going to do it.
Sort the inventors by birth date, oldest to youngest. So if you've never used sort, the way that sort works is that you get 2 items, and you have these 2 items in your hand, and you're asked to sort just those 2 items. So you say, is person A older than person B? And if so, you put the older person on top. And the way that we do that is by returning 1.
I got something
and
in my eye.
1, and that's going to bubble these items up and down in the array. So we say const ordered equals inventors dot sort, and we have a function, which that function is going to give us like the first person and the second person, or a lot of people just like to use A and B, so whatever you prefer though. So the first person is going to be A, the second person is going to be B, and then we will say if A dot, and we need to do it based on their birth date here. So A dot year is greater than B dot year, then we return 1, else you return -1. And that's just going to move these people up and down in the, you can sort of imagine them bubbling up and down inside of the array.
Alright, so he even skipped
Let's take a look at what you hear.
the A
Oh, we got an
equals
error
B.
here on line 39. What did we do? Should be able to spell function right. There we go. And now we have the oldest people here, as well as the youngest people. Now, this is really, really long. We could really cut that down by doing something like this. So ordered equals inventors dot sort, and you have A and you have B, and from that we are going to do what's called a ternary, I can't say it properly, ternary operator, whatever. Somebody once sent me a message after a talk and said you said ternary wrong, and now I'm self-conscious every single time I say it. So from that we want to have a ternary, which is like a shorthand if statement. The A dot year is greater than B dot year, and if that is true, return 1, otherwise return -1.
Right, this is very useful. I need to learn how to do this properly. So let me see what he did. If A dot year is more than B dot year, then return 1, otherwise return -1. So would that give me the same? Yes, but a lot shorter and cleaner. I really like that. I need to learn how to write this properly and remember it but nonetheless I really like it. How many years did all the inventors live all together? Alright, so we'll have to use reduce this time, and we'll do const all years. Excuse my lame variable names, but we'll do inventors dot reduce, and now we had to put 3 arguments, I believe. So first we'll do sum, and I think before that we need to define it, so let sum equal 0. What was it? Reduce JS. Accumulator current value, initial value, sum and cur, and we'll probably have to put them in another bracket, and then do an arrow function, and what was it? Sum plus equals cur dot, but you have to sum up how many years did all the inventors live all together, so it's sum plus equals year dot, not year but cur dot past minus cur dot year, and put this in a bracket as well. Oops. And then console.walk sum. So let's see how this will work. I will comment this out, but we get 0. Perfect. This is the current value, initial value. I don't think we need an initial value. And the accumulator, I don't see him set up the accumulator anyways. Oh, we need to do all years, not some. All years. We get some strange object, alright. Array. So dot reduce. Accumulator. Can we delete this? Let's see what will happen. We get the same, so we didn't need it, indeed. Then the current value, which yeah, I'm not sure. Let's see how he did it.
And that is the exact same thing as what we were doing here, just doing it in one line with an arrow function, an implicit return, and a ternary operator. Let's double check that still works. Works great. Next one, how many years did all of the inventors live? So what a reduce will do is we're like a sort in a map. They will just take items in and either sort them, or they will turn them into something else, or they will filter them down. What a reduce will do is allow you to sort of build something on every single one. So if you've ever done code like this, where you like do like var total years equals 0, and then you bust out the old for loop, which one is that right here, and then you have inventors, and then you do like total years plus equals inventors. You've done this before, right? Where you have
Yeah.
a variable before, and then you do this crazy loop, and then finally, when you're done, you can console log total years, right? A reduce is just a much cleaner way to do that, and you don't have to do this crazy square bracket I, which I've seen a lot of people have trouble learning. So that's what we're going to do is we're going to say const total years equals inventors dot reduce.
Alright.
And the way that reduce works is it's going to give you sort of like your running total or what you've returned from this function last time. So we're going to call that total. And then it also is going to give you the inventor. And from that, we have to wrap those in some parentheses. We have an arrow function here. And from that, we are going to return the total, which is what the total was last time around. Again, all these functions, reduce, sort, filter, they just loop over every single one. And then we are going to return the number of years that inventor had lived. So we're going to say inventor dot past minus inventor dot year.
Alright.
Now let's try that. It's not going to work totally for us. Console log total years, and we get this object 7.
Yeah.
What's going on here? And the problem is that first time around we don't have a total, and it's equal to undefined. So what we need to do is just make this
And we
0.
need to pass an initial value. Is it right here that I need to pass it? 861. Let's see what he gets.
And that will then allow us to add it up. 523 years. Whew, how you doing? Maybe you need to go get a drink. Get a
523 years, so he got a different value from us. Do I have to bust out the calculator now?
sports drink, something like that. We have another one coming up here. So
Let me just copy it from his finished. Let's see if we do that, if we're going to get another answer. Right, 861. So no, we didn't. I don't know if in 7 years that array changed or what happened, but seems like we got the correct answer. And I'm going to revert it back to what I had. Right.
sort inventors by years lived. Okay, so const oldest equals inventors dot. Now we're going to sort
Sorry.
them.
Sort the inventors by years lived. Sort the inventors by years lived. So you have to make a const oldest sort. Not oldest sort, but yeah. Oldest sort and then do inventors. I'm kind of cheating because I can see what he wrote. Then what we're going to put inventor and then maybe an we want to sort them by the years lived. This is how we get like the years lived of an inventor. I think we'll have to combine it because they're under the same
And we are
point,
going
but
to get A and B. And before I do the returning 1 or negative 1, we're going to const. We're going to create some variables so we can use that in our if statement. So like const last guy, how old did he live? A dot past minus A dot year. And then we'll say next guy is equal to B dot year. Then from that, we are going to say if last guy is greater than next guy, we are going to return 1 or negative 1, sorry, and then else we are going to return 1. Now that seems a little bit long. We can really clean that up, and we can
that's really
say
clever.
return. We can use our turn array operator, return next guy if that is true.
So this is really clever what he did, but he's not using sort, and I thought we have to use sort. So A and B, put them in another bracket. I won't make an arrow function, but function the const list guy equals a dot past minus a dot here const is next guy which equals to b dot past minus b dot year. Okay, and we'll return last guy, next guy, minus 1 or
2, negative 1. Otherwise, if that is false, return 1. And that's the exact same thing as doing this if statement. We just do it in one fell swoop.
okay.
Log the oldest. Console.table it. Beautiful. This guy lived a whole bunch of years. This guy.
Console.table oldest sort. We console log this and see where I made the mistakes. Line 70. Not last guy, but oldest guy. Alright. Yeah, seems like we've ordered them correctly. But we didn't use reduce, and that's what kind of threw me off.
I didn't live as many. Looking good. Next, create a list of boulevards in Paris that contain de anywhere in the name.
Where are the boulevards? We have const people and const inventors. Ah, there is a link. Right,
All
how's
right,
she
so
doing that?
I've got this link here, and this one we're going to have to do from the console. I'm just going to open it up. Now, we've got all of these boulevards here, and I need to first get the DOM elements out of the page. So how would we do that? Well, we could say document.query selector, but we don't know what to select. So what we have to do is get out our DevTools, inspect whatever contains this. Let's see what contains all of these. Here, there we go. MW-category. Const cat document.query selector dot MW category. Got here. Go. Category is equal to that div. And then we want to find the links within it. So I'm going to make another one. Const links equals, we can say category.query selector all. Again, you can call query selector on any existing DOM element. It doesn't always have to be document. It could look inside of an existing element. And that's really why I'm doing this in 2 steps. I could have just said MW category A and found all the links, but I really wanted to show you that you can call query selector against any existing DOM element to look inside of that DOM element. So I'm just going to look for links inside of that. Oh, let's see. We got links. Aha. So this is a list of links. This is every link on the actual page. Now, what I want to do is first we're going to convert that list of links to a list of names, and then we're going to filter that list of names for only ones that include the actual name. So we're going to say const equals links dot map. Remember, if we take in a list of links and kick out a list of names, so we're going to map over each one. It's going to be a link, and from that link we are going to return just the link.text content.
Text content.
And that will give us whatever the text is inside of that rather than the entire link, because we don't really care about the rest of the link. So let's see what we got here. Uh-oh, links.map. Oh, perfect. I'm glad we ran into this. What did I tell you in an earlier video? Query selector will return to you a node list. And if we open up the prototype, you don't see map. You see for each, but not a map. So what we need to do is change this into an array, because right now it's just a node list. So there's 2 ways we could do that. First, you can just wrap the entire thing in array.from, and that will convert it into an array. Or you might also see people doing something like this, where you create an array, and then you use the ES6 spread to spread every single item into the array. And again, if you've watched the ES6 videos that I've done on spreads, you'll know that a spread will take every item out of something, an iterable, which in this case is going to be a node list, and put it into the containing array. So I think array.from is probably a little bit more readable in this case, so let's go with that. And then we need to, this should work. Now, I can't rerun this code here because I've used const. That's sort of one of the pains of using const. It's going to tell you it's already been declared. So I just need to refresh and rerun this code here. So there we go. Is a huge array of every single one. And then I'm just going to immediately filter that. So what I like to do with mine is let's just put them on their own line. The first one will map it, and then the second one will filter it.
Okay.
So let's say street name, and we're going to
contains
only return if the street name includes.
Okay.
Let's see what we got here.
Why not contains?
Gotta refresh again and rerun this. Now is equal. There we go. Now we've got a subset of that initial array, only containing the side effect.
All right.
Sorry for my French users. We have Canadian French, not the same as European French. Next one, we've got a sort exercise, which is sorting the people alphabetic.
Sort the people alphabetically by last name. Okay, so last the const last name sort equals, we'll sort the people. Yes, we have people, but if it was on the objects, it would have been much easier because we can just do inventor.last and sort by that. But now I have to sort of take the last names. I think it's something with how they are separated by the comma and the space. Right, I'm not sure about that. Let's see.
Last name. So we're not dealing with the inventors anymore. We're done with them.
He'll
Now we
split
actually
them, I
work
think.
with people.
and get
Okay,
the
well, there's no like nice object here,
even
so how would I?
indexes.
Well, let's go up here to the sort exercise, and we're going to say const alpha equals. Take the people, and we are going to sort over it. Dot sort.
Alright, he's going to
Let's just use a
sort.
regular function here, and we can convert it to ES6. And we're going to get the last one and the next. Now, I don't care about returning anything just yet. What I want to do is just console log the last one just to see what we're working with. Oh, we get an error because I wrote this code in here, which this was meant to run on the Wikipedia page. And here you're trying to call query select.
Alright, we console log the last one. We get Orin, Becker, Carol. We don't get the first one, but we get every other one. And the next one, we get the first one, second one, third one. Next one, last one. Becker, Caro. Alright, so is it the case that last one gets all of them and next one gets all of them except the first one?
Selector against category, and if this category comes back with nothing, you can't call query selector against it. So you'd have to do a check there if you
I
weren't
got something in mind, it's
sure.
really
Let's comment that
annoying.
out for now. Deal with what we've got here. There we go. So look, Beck, Glenn, Blake, William. So that is the last one. But what I really want is to convert that into a first name and a last name. So what we can do is we can say const parts equals last one dot split. And what are we going to split it on? Well, one thing that all of these people have in common is that there's a comma and a space. We're going to split it on a comma and a space. And let's look at the parts that we have here. Okay, so now we get an array where the first thing is the last name and the second thing is the first name. It's a little bit backwards. So what we could do is we could destructure that, meaning that rather than return an array, we can put those into their own variables right away. So we say square bracket last comma first, and now if we just console log the
It's interesting how he's doing a const and then he's doing like last and first. Dot split and then he splits on the comma and the space. What does he console log last one? It's kind of the same. If we console log last and then first, Erin. See, it starts from the second index, so don't we have to split on the next one? And then it has to be first and then last. This makes more sense to me. First is not defined. First. Alright, so this way I think we get. See, I was going to say we get all other first names, but we don't get the last one's name. Anyways, if we go last, Henry. Yeah, that's interesting.
Last, first, as their own separate variables. There we
I
go.
don't
Blake
quite get
William,
it.
Beck William, Mick, Meadows, whatever we have there. Cool. Now we have some proper variables to work with, and then we have to do that with the next one as well. And we probably want to rename these suckers to be something that obviously we can't use last and first. So I'll say A last, A first, A first. And this one is going to be B last, B first. That's going to be the last person, the next person. So we have here. Good. Then we do our simple last name here. That's really all we're concerned about in this case. So return A last is greater than B last. If that's true, return -1. Otherwise, return 1. Alpha. There we go. Sorted. Blake William is the first one. Last one is Beck Glenn. Oh, we're backwards there. We need to return 1 and -1 instead. There we go. Beck as the first one. Blake is the last one. So you see that we're actually not using this data that we've just made here. That's simply for the conversion, but we're still hanging on to the original string that we were working with. If you did want to return an array or an object or something like that, that's where reduce would come in. So my editor's yelling at me here and it's telling me that I shouldn't be using a proper function. I should be using an arrow function in this case. Still works just good. Woo, one more. Here we go. And this one's going to use reduce, sum up the instances of these. So we've got car, truck, bike, walk,
Sum up the instances
I want to tally at the end of the day
of each of these. So
and reduce is like one of the most flexible methods that we have in an array, and this is just another
the
way
number
that
of instances they appear in this
like
array.
const transportation equals data dot reduce, and we are going to then give ourselves a function which is going to be the object obj, and then the let's call it item, which is going to be car, truck, bike on every single one. Now we need to start with an object which has to have something like a car 0, walk 0, truck 0. And if you're looking and be like, oh Wes, I don't know what all the possible ones are, you can't just like hard code those in there. And that's right, we're just going to start with a blank object here, and we'll do this by ourselves. So let's go back. We're just going to start with a blank object. That's the starting, and we're going to loop over every single one. So what we will do is just console log item
also walk item. So we have car, truck, bike, walk, car. Alright.
and then return the object. And I just want to show you here that we're going to get every single item as we loop over it. Good. Car, truck, bike, walk, etc., etc. Now, what we want to do is we need to say if, well, let's do this. We'll say object of item plus plus. And usually what that would do, if we had a walk 0 here, it would just increment it to 1. But because we don't know if that key exists just yet, what we need to do is check for it on the end here. So we have to say if there is no object item, then object item is equal to 0. That will just set the initial 1 to 0, and then we can move along and increment it and return that object. So if that has worked here, console.log, transportation. Here we go. Object, bike, car, truck, van. So you see what they're there. I find that reduce is probably the hardest one for people to get.
Yeah.
But we start with a blank object, and then every time we loop over one, we first see is there even a 0 there to work with at all. If not, we need to make an entry for that, and then we go ahead and increment it. And that's really nice because then I could come along here and add like a pogo stick, and when I refresh, the key of pogo stick is going to be added, no problem to that. Actually, you probably shouldn't put spaces in there, but no problem, added in. So, I know that was a lot. It's just a lot of exercise. We got another one.
Alright, so a couple of things to mention is that there was no way I was going to figure this out on my own, or at least there was no way to figure this out on my own when you have the video right next to it and you have another tab with finished right here, because I tend to overthink and I tend to jump onto the easy way, which is just watch the video or look at the solution, which is tutorial here basically. And that's why I'm going through the Odin project, because it's mostly reading and doing it yourself. And before, when I was learning to code, I did a lot of this. I watched a lot of tutorials and coded along, and you think you understand what you're doing, but you're really not. So I didn't get any value from this, although we solved quite a few issues right here. Maybe the only value was that, and I didn't fully remember it. How to do this with the question mark and then return and so on. But yeah, so for the next one I'm just going to commit this. Let me quickly commit it. Git add git commit. Alright, at least I can have one push today. Git push. Alright, so for the next one I'm closing this out. I'm just going to watch what he's doing and I'll try to remember as much as I can, but I'm not going to try it on my own because it's a tutorial. After that we'll do these exercises, and I cannot watch a video to get the answers, or in the repository they actually have the answers, but I'm not going to look at them, or at least I'm going to try. So we'll try to do this together, but this video I don't really learn well from videos, so I'm just going to watch it quickly to get it over with, and we'll go on to the exercises. We get a nut. Okay, sorry about that.
Where we're going to learn about a few new array methods that come in handy when you're working with data. So we've got two arrays here with some people and some comments.
How long have you been programming? On and off for years, but I couldn't get it to stick. If you look at my GitHub, I show this almost every stream, but my first commits were from 2018 when I was 17, and if I was at least a tiny bit consistent I would have made it by now, but as you can see, what commit per year and so on. So yeah, this is the most consistent I've ever been. It's this year, but yeah, I'm not very proud of that. Thank you so much for tuning in, Mutant Rabbit. I can see my alerts are still not working. Someone subscribed, but it didn't fire the alerts and so on. So I'm pissed with that. But anyways.
And first we want to learn about .sum and .every. .sum will check if at least one thing in your array meets.
It returns true.
So we'll say const is adult equals and call .sum against it. Now sum will take a function that will check it for every single one that we have. That's going to give us our person, and we
What have you all done? Do you mean in terms of what projects have I done, or I don't quite understand?
will say if person dot year, and now we need like the current
Or what did I do all the time?
year. So you could take the current year and minus that, or what we could do is we could say const current year equals new date dot get full year. Say if current year minus person dot year is greater or equal to 19, then return true.
What projects? Right, I'm going to show you quickly. My old projects are just front end. I don't think it's anything that impressive. Where did I look at my repositories? I have some just front end landing pages and so on, some unfinished projects, and I have a couple of full stack projects, but they're on GitHub. GitHub.com. Yeah, there you go. This was back when I was in the Java bootcamp. We did some full stack project, but the last one I did that I'm really proud of is this rock paper scissors. You can find it at 3drps.netlify.app, and it's a 3JS rock paper scissors app. We did it on stream, so if you want you can watch some of the previous recordings we did a couple of days ago, and I think it's pretty cool. This is like the last project I did. Actually, the last project was DHS Sketch, but DHS Sketch. Do I have the pages for that? I'm not sure. What was it? HA Sketch. This again a project from the Odin project where we had to make an edge sketch, and I did it with all the bonus points which meant random colors, and the color needs to get more opaque each time the mouse passes on each tile. So yeah, this is actually the last project, but the rock paper scissors is what I'm mostly proud of. So yeah, this is what kind of I've been working on the past few days.
And what that should do, if we console log is adult, is give us true, because there is someone who is greater or equal to. There we go. A little thing you can do in console log is if you pop curly brackets around it, it's going to show you the name of the variable as well as the value. So the is adult is going to be equal to true. That makes sense. Now we can...
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much for tuning in, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, my man.
Make this a lot simpler. I'm going to rewrite it here. Const is adult equals people.sum person, and from that we'll have a block, and we need the current year again, and then we can simply just return current year minus person dot year is greater or equal to 19. And that's going to be a lot simpler than writing it like this. I think it reads a little bit nicer. We use an arrow function here, and we return the current year. If you want to be a total hot shot, you could take this entire thing, pop it in some parentheses here, get rid of that, and then use the implicit return without the curly brackets here. Woo! Hot shot! That would do the same thing. Let's save it. I have to comment this one out so we don't duplicate
I
the
think he's
variable.
an optimization freak like me. Like I always try to get the code more optimized, shorter, easier to read, so on.
True.
More performant.
All right, let's do the next one, which is going to be .every. So is everybody 19? So we can simply just take this, what we've done here, and replace it with .every. And it counts all adults. So log adults. It's going to give us false. Why is that giving us false? Because not every single item in the array is going to meet our criteria. So some will check if one, every will check for every single one of them. Next up, we have array.prototype.find, and find is kind of like filter, but instead of returning you a subset of the array, it's going to return you the first item that it finds. So we want to find the comment with the ID of 823423. So say const comment equals, and we'll take this comments array. We'll call .find on it. We will run a function against it, which will give us the comment. And we'll say if comment.id, I believe it is. Let's double check that. Here we go. Comment.id is equal to that. Is it a string? No, it's a number. Then return true. Then we should be able to console log the comment. Good. We've got that one specific comment. This is super good. Now, take a second, pause the video, try to convert this to a arrow function with an implicit return. What we could do instead is const comment. Whoa! Whoa! Comment. There we go.
What was that?
Find comment, and then we simply just return.
His direction was golden.
With an implicit return. What we could do instead is const.
That was
comment.
golden.
Whoa! Whoa! Comment. There we go. Comments.find comment, and then we simply just return this bit right here. And because that is going to be true or false, we don't need to have an if statement because it's just going to return a boolean of true or false. And then that is a nice one-liner rather than having to do it in that long. And then that should still work exactly the same. Good. Next up, and finally, we have .find index, which is going to find where something is inside of the array. Let's say I wanted to delete one of these, but in order to delete something from an array, you need to know where in the array it actually is. So if we've only got this ID, we would say const index equals comments.find index, and then we do the exact same thing we did before. Comment is equal to that, and then if we console log the index, it'll tell us that it is 1, which means it should be the second item in our array. There we go. Now, how do you delete it? Well, there's two ways you could delete it from the array. We could simply just say comments.splice. We could start at the index and go for 1. Let's take a look at what we got here. If we type in comments now, console.table our comments, you see that the super good comment is totally gone. Or what you could also do is, and this is very popular in the Redux world, is you create a new array of the updated comments, where you would say something like const new comments equals an array. And what you do is you just take a copy of the comments before it. So we say comments.slice. We start at 0 and we go until the index. And then we start at the index plus 1 and go until the end. So you don't pass it anything. And that's just going to build a new array of the comments. So if I console.table the comments, good. Console.table new comments. New comments. Oh, what did we forget here? It gave us an array of 2 arrays. So what's wrong with this? It's because we did not spread the items into the new array. And again, if this is not making sense to you, feel free to stick with your splice or go back into my ES6 videos and check out the spread operator ones. So if we console.table the new comments, that one's gone. However, we still have the original comments array where it says super good. So that's just a couple more array methods that you should keep in your back pocket. Knowing all of the possible array methods and when to use them can come in really handy when you're massaging your data.
Cool. So we're done with those. I can close this out. This one as well. This one I don't need. So at this point you just need a little bit more practice. Go back to JavaScript exercise repository that we introduced in the arrays and loops assignment. Review each readme file prior to completing the following exercises in order. And I actually think that we have that repository download already. iOS. Is it? Troubleshooting errors, audio recipes, read code problems. Is it this one? Nope. Is it ONX OS? Nope. I must have it somewhere. I just don't know where, because CDOS templates repos, because I did exercises 1 through 7. GitHub. It's not lead code problems, that's not it for sure. My repositories, JavaScript exercises, I think it's this one. Yep. How did I miss that? JavaScript. I need to go into repos first. CD JavaScript exercises. Okay, that took a while. Right, so we have to make exercise 8 till 12. We introduced the race segment. Okay. If you feel yourself getting overwhelmed or stuck, don't be afraid to go back and review RAS. Okay, so not the solution, but the readme file first. How did you start the project? If you go live, go to the calculator. No. The main purpose of this exercise. Okay, the setup should be all the same. Okay. The thing is, I don't see an like an HTML file where we can open the console, so I don't remember how we did that. GitHub. At the very top of the file, use required to import the code. Do we just go live on this one? No. How did we do that? I don't remember. Ah, it was all in the console. Alright, so I can get this to full screen probably. And I run them in the terminal, I remember now. So we need to go into 08 calculator and do npm run calculator.spec.js npm error missing script ls. Yeah, if you actually write calculator right. npm test, not npm run. npm test. Alright. Perfect, so we got that working. I'm going to take a quick break because we've been going at it for more than an hour straight, so 10-minute timer again. And I'll be right back with you guys. Thanks so much. I'll be right back in 10 minutes. Alright, I'm back. Thank you for sticking with me. I remember these exercises were quite fun, so we'll tackle them together. Leave that page. And after we do that, learn about the arguments. I think after we do the exercises, we'll be able to finish up this lesson. So let's see. Calculator.js. The goal for this exercise is to create a calculator that does the following: add, subtract, get the sum, multiply, get the power, find the factorial. In order to do this, please fill out each function with your solution. Make sure to return the value so you can test in the jest. To see the expected value, take a look at the spec file that houses the jest test cases. So first we'll add the function for add, and what do you pass to it? Adds 2 into calculator.add, so it takes two values, let's say a and b, and it has to return a plus b. Oops. Return. Alright, so if we save it, I'm going to minimize that. If we save it and we run the calculator once again, this one is passed. Now can we make it into an arrow function? Just return a plus b. Const add equals like this. Can we do it like this? So the test was failed. Yeah, because of this I don't need this. Okay, let's do it again. Right, so it still passes the test. Now subtraction. So we actually need to uncomment those, I believe, as well. That's positive number. Yep. Okay, so yeah, the add is all running well. Now we'll go on to the subtract, which is basically the same but with a minus instead of a plus. You again take a and b, and you do a minus. I need to uncomment those as well. Not uncomment, but remove the skip. So let's test it now. Right, this is done. Computes the sum of an empty array. Computes the sum of an array of one number. Computes the sum of an array of two numbers. Computes the sum of an array of many numbers. So the sum will take an array and it will sum up all the numbers in this array. And I guess this can be done with the reduce. So let's see. It calculator.sum to take in an array. Alright, so maybe we can do equals or just take it in here. So if we do array dot reduce and we take the sum and after that the current. Just a second. And then do like an arrow function. Now I have to look at the reduce again. It will be sum was equals current, but it's going to throw me an error because I'm trying to access function here. Access array actually, and we don't have that. But we're also not going to have sum and cur, I believe. Let me get rid of that and no, sum current. So if we take a moment now and forget about reduce, how we're going to do it without reduce? We're going to take in array and we'll have to loop through the array. So we can probably make in here r dot reduce for sum and cur we can do sum plus equals cur, and then we can return sum. Why is that now? Do you have to do it inside the bracket? No. Or we have to put another bracket. Yeah. Kind of. Kind of, not really. Okay, will that work now? Let's uncomment some of them. The sum. Remove the skips. Hi there, Sedat Kankara. Thanks so much for tuning in, man. Really appreciate it. Hi, how are you doing? Let's see how that works now. Alright, we're getting some errors and we're returning function sum. It has to be we have to change that because already the function is called sum and we're returning sum. So let's try sum num. Let's see how that works. Alright, so still not the case. A reduce of empty array with no initial value. So we probably have to let me see the other one. Compute the sum of an array of one number. Sum num is not defined, and no initial value assignment to constant value. I understand sum num, but sum num is not defined, so let's just try to see how it works. Alright, still not the case. Sum num is not defined. Sum num is not defined. So, alright, so if we define let sum num equals 0, will this work? No. And we get 0 and the expected is 25, so we always get 0. Can we The thing was with how they've set up those exercises, I'm not really able to debug them with the console logs. So for example, how do I console.log now cur? I cannot, right? I'm not getting the console logs. So I like this whole thing of the tests having check marks and so on, but I cannot really debug my code to see what's happening. Alright, what if we define a initial value? Still not the case. So we do array.reduce, and this is the array that initially is passed in. This is the sum of the total numbers, and cur is the current item in the array. So the sum num being 0 now was equals the current number, and at the end we should return sum num, which in my opinion makes sense, but I'm going to check the solution. Alright, they do it in like a one-liner arrow function. Let me copy that and see what went wrong. So they have a total and current, which in my case is sum num, and cur, which I don't need to define then. Then I don't need to define sum num. Can I do it like that? What made you want to be a full stack dev in 8 months? That's a pretty good question, but honestly I cannot tell yet. I'll tell you in a few weeks what my motivation is, what my drive is, but currently I'm not like allowed to say it. Stay tuned, and in a couple of weeks I'm going to announce it. But thanks so much for the interest, my guy. I just cannot tell you still. Right, so sum num is not defined. Yeah, but maybe because we have to return it in here. But then I think it has to be another variable. Wait. The total, they return the total plus current. So I can indeed return this and get rid of this. And it should be the same, right? It never is the same. We return undefined this time. Alright. And this will work out fine, right? Yes, it does. So I'm not sure what I did wrong here, but anyways, let's do the multiply. Let me not look at the solution, but multiplies two numbers, multiplies several numbers. Okay, so again we take in an array. So function multiply takes in an array and then it returns array dot reduce, and then we can just do the same total current and have an arrow function where total multiplies by current, and then it has to be 1 probably, because everything times by 0 equals 0, so I don't think we can have that. Did I uncomment the multiply tests? I did not, hence why it's not working. Okay, let's try them again. Alright, so the multiply works. We have the power now, so power raises one number to the power of another number, raises one number to the power of a large number. Alright, so in both cases we have A and B, and A needs to be put to the power of B, so 4 to the third power and 3 to the 10th power. Right, so how did you do power in JavaScript? I don't remember. Using math, the times. In addition to the operator mod power exponential. Okay, so can we power will take A and B, and then can we, I think we can make it into one liner. Put this in brackets, and then this has to return A times B. Get rid of those. No. Why is this giving me an error? A times B. Let me see why that's giving me an error. Probably something very silly. Let me remove those skips from the tests. What's happening? Syntax error. I have to remove the function, of course. Okay. Like that. So the power works now, and last we have the factorial. What was factorial? Completes the factorial of 0. Computes, not completes. Computes the factorial of 1. Computes the factorial of 2. So factorial was like 5 times 4, 5 times 3, and so on. Just 1 second. I remember that we used to do this recursively, but I'm not sure how to do it now, since I don't think I'm allowed to use recursion. So let me think about it. A factorial of 5, for example, is 120. Do I have a calculator on Linux? Yes. So 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 is 120 indeed. So we have to get the number that is given to us in the function, and then start like a loop from that number until 0, and multiply each number and add it to a sum. So let's say it takes A, and we'll start a quick for loop. Let I equals 0 and until A is more than 0, I plus plus. We'll have a let sum equals 0. And in that loop we can do sum plus equals A, and then A minus minus, and not plus equals but times equals, and then return the sum. So I think this is going to work, but I think there is a more elegant solution. But let's see nonetheless. I didn't uncomment the tests, of course. So let me quickly do that without the skip, save it. Okay, and we have an error. It always returns 0 because the sum is 0, I believe. And we try to multiply by 0. So these are all the tests passed. We successfully completed the exercise, but I'm curious what they did for the last one. I think they did the same. Okay, with the exception that they did this if statement, which I kind of skipped, and I think mine is actually a little bit cleaner, although yeah, I guess there are just two ways to do it. Alright, so remove this and save it and push it to GitHub. Git status. Can we cd out of it and do git status? Yep. Git out dot. So committed. Did exercises for 08 on calculator, and then we can push it. And with that, I think I'll be done for today with the stream, because it's already almost 9 AM and I have work in a few minutes. So this will be done for yeah, I'm basically done for today with streaming, although I'll probably come back and finish those exercises on my own, so I can finally close this chapter on the Odin project and be done with it, so we can start with the calculator project tomorrow. This is the last project of the fundamentals and I'm very pumped about it. So yes, as I said, I have a work in a few minutes, so I'm going to end the stream now and we'll see each other again probably tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. It was a pleasure as always, and until next time, see you. Bye bye.